The morning sky over Luxara was a soft purple color, just like it had been for the past 3,000 years. The twin suns cast gentle light through the floating cities that drifted slowly among the white clouds. Elder Myruin stood on her balcony, watching the young ones learn to glide between the crystal towers. Their wings caught the breeze as they laughed and played in the warm air. The Zephrians had built their world to be perfect. No wars, no violence, no suffering. They were a peaceful people who spent their days creating art, writing poetry, and caring for their beautiful planet. Their bones were hollow like birds, and their skin was so thin you could see through it. They moved like dancers through their sky cities, never needing to touch the ground far below. Myruin had lived for 800 years, and she had never seen anything uglier than a storm cloud. The Zephrians had forgotten that evil existed. In the galaxy, they had no armies, no weapons, no way to fight. They had never needed them. That morning, everything changed. The first thing they noticed was how the light suddenly got dim. Myruin looked up and saw something that made her heart stop. Massive black shapes were blocking out the suns. Ships bigger than their largest cities hung in the sky like giant metal beasts. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Those? Whispered a young Zephrian named Kaelnor as he landed beside her on the balcony. Myruin had read about such things in the old books, stories from before their time of peace. Warships, she said quietly. Someone has come to hurt us. Ships began to move lower. Strange sounds filled the air. Loud, harsh noises that the Zephrians had never heard before. Then the first energy beam lanced down from the sky. It hit the Crystal Library, the most beautiful building in their city. In 1 second, 3,000 years of art and knowledge turned to dust and smoke. The Zephrians screamed and scattered. Like leaves in a hurricane, they had no idea what to do. Some tried to hide in their homes. Others flew toward the ground, hoping to find safety in the caves below. But the beams kept coming, destroying everything they touched. From the largest warship, smaller vessels poured out like angry insects. They were carrying soldiers, if you could call them that. The Krex warriors were 8 feet tall, with thick armored skin that looked like black stone. They had long claws that could cut through metal and yellow eyes that showed no mercy. One was strong enough to break a Zephrian in half with their bare hands. The Krex had been moving across the galaxy for over a century, taking what they wanted and destroying what they didn't need. They had crushed 17 different worlds, turning proud civilizations into ash and slavery. To them, the Zephrians were just more weaklings to be swept aside. Commander Vrakthal stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching his troops land on the floating cities. The Zephrians were running everywhere, crying and begging for mercy. It was almost too easy. "Sir," said one of his officers, "the planet appears to be defenseless. No military installations, no weapons, no shields. This will be over in a few hours." Vrakthal nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Strip the planet of anything valuable, then burn the rest. Leave no survivors to tell others what happened here." Down in the city, Elder Myruin was trying to help her people escape when she saw something that broke her heart. A group of Krex soldiers had cornered a family of Zephrians, a mother, father, and 2 small children. The family was on their knees, crying and begging for their lives. "Please," the father said, his voice shaking with fear. "We have done nothing wrong. We are peaceful people. We have never hurt anyone." The lead Krex warrior looked down at them. With cold eyes, peaceful means weak, weak means dead. He raised his weapon. Myruin closed her eyes and turned away. She couldn't watch. She couldn't help. She was just as helpless as the rest of her people. But she remembered something from the old archives. Before the time of peace, when the Zephrians had still traveled among the stars, they had built an emergency beacon. It was designed to send a message across the galaxy, calling for help from anyone who might hear it. The beacon had been stored in the council chamber for 3,000 years, gathering dust like an old relic. No one had ever thought they would need it. But now, as her world died around her, Myruin knew it was their only hope. She flew as fast as she could through the burning city, dodging energy beams and falling debris. The council chamber was half destroyed, but the beacon was still there. hidden in a secret compartment behind the speaker's chair. Her hands shook as she activated the ancient device. The controls were old, but she remembered how to use them from her studies of history. The beacon hummed to life, its crystal core glowing with soft blue light. "This is Elder Myrowin of the Zephrian people," she said into the transmitter, her voice barely steady. "Our world is under attack. We are dying. We have no weapons, no armies, no way to fight. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We are a peaceful people. We have never hurt anyone. But they are killing us anyway." She paused, listening to the sounds of destruction outside. "We don't have much time. The coordinates are included in this transmission. If you can help us, please come quickly. If you cannot help us, please remember that we existed. Please remember that we tried to live in peace." The beacon sent the message racing through hyperspace at faster than light speed. It would reach the nearest civilizations in hours, the distant ones in days or weeks. But Myrowin didn't know if anyone would care enough to help. Most species in the galaxy had heard of the Kreks. They were too dangerous to fight, too powerful to stop. The smart thing to do was to stay far away and hope the Kreks never noticed you. The message traveled through the void between stars, carrying the desperate plea of a dying civilization. It reached the monitoring stations of the Rigel Collective, who observed it with interest but chose not to act. It was detected by the Andromedans, who discussed it in their council chambers before deciding it was too risky to get involved. It passed through the sensor networks of dozens of advanced civilizations, each one more powerful than the Zephrians. But none of them wanted to face the Kreks armada. None of them wanted to risk their own people for strangers they had never met. The signal continued its journey across the galaxy, growing weaker with each passing light year. By the time it reached the Outer Rim territories, many species couldn't even detect it anymore. It seemed like the Zephrians would die alone, forgotten by a galaxy that was too afraid to help. But there was one species that the signal had not yet reached. A young race from a small blue planet on the edge of civilized space.
Yes.
They called themselves humans, and they had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Most of the galaxy barely knew they existed. The humans lived on what other species called a death world, a planet so dangerous that most civilized beings wouldn't survive a single day there. The humans had learned to fight because they had to. Their world was full of predators, diseases, natural disasters, and 1,000 other ways to die. But the humans had also learned something else. They had learned to help each other. When someone was in trouble, when someone called for help, humans had a strange habit of answering that call, even if it meant risking their own lives. Even if it meant fighting impossible odds, the Zephrian distress signal was still racing through space, carrying with it the last hope of a peaceful civilization. Soon, it would reach Earth, and when it did, the humans would have to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. The Kreks had no idea what was coming. The signal from Luxara reached Earth 6 months after Elder Myrowin sent it. By then, the Zephrian homeworld might already be dead, but the humans didn't know that yet. The message arrived at the Deep Space Monitoring Station buried deep under the mountains of Colorado, where Commander Jake Morrison was finishing his night shift. Jake had been watching the stars for 20 years, listening for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. Most nights were quiet, filled with nothing but background, radiation, and the occasional comet. But tonight was different. The computers started beeping with an urgent signal that made Jake sit up straight in his chair. "Amy, get over here," he called to Lieutenant Amy Foster, who was working at the next station. "I'm getting something weird from the Outer Rim." Amy walked over and looked at the data streaming across Jake's screen. The signal was unlike anything they had seen before. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and it was coming from a star system 800 light-years away. "Is it a first contact situation?" Amy asked, her voice filled with excitement. Jake shook his head as he ran the signal through the translation programs. "I don't think so. Listen to this." The computer's voice filled the room as it played back the translated message. Elder Myrowin's words were clear and desperate, even across the vast distance of space and time. She spoke of peace, of death, of a people who had never hurt anyone but were being killed anyway. "My God," Amy whispered. "They're asking for help." Jake stared at the screen, thinking about what this meant. The signal had taken 6 months to reach Earth, which meant the attack had happened 6 months ago. For all they knew, the Zephrians were already extinct. But that didn't change the fact that someone had called for help. "Get me Admiral Patricia Stone," Jake said. "Emergency priority." Admiral Stone arrived at the monitoring station within an hour. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen more battles than most soldiers could imagine. She listened to the recording 3 times before speaking. "What do we know about these Kreks?" she asked. "Not much," Jake replied. "But we're already running deep scans of the Galactic database. What we've found so far isn't good. The information that came back over the next few hours painted a picture of a nightmare. The Kreks hegemony had been expanding across the galaxy for over a century, conquering world after world. They were bigger and stronger than most species, with technology that could destroy entire planets. They had crushed 17 different civilizations and enslaved millions of people. "They're too strong," said Admiral Stone's chief of staff, Colonel Brian Murphy. "We'd be sending our people to die for nothing. The Zephrians are probably already dead anyway." Admiral Stone walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. They were still considered a young race, barely worth noticing by most of the older civilizations. But the humans had something that most species didn't understand. They had learned to fight on a world that was trying to kill them every day. "How many ships can we spare?" she asked. "Ma'am, you can't be serious," Colonel Murphy said. "We're talking about 2 ships against an entire armada. It's suicide," maybe Admiral Stone replied. "But someone called for help. That means something." She turned back to her staff. "I want the USS Valiant and the USS Defiance ready for deep space combat operations within 12 hours. Full weapons load, best crews we have." "And if the Kreks decide to follow our ships back to Earth?" Murphy asked. Admiral Stone smiled grimly. "Then they'll learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders." Captain Lisa Hayes was sleeping when the call came. She had been dreaming about her daughter's birthday party, which she had missed because of military duty. The communication panel beside her bed buzzed with an urgent message that made her sit up instantly. "Captain Hayes, report to the Valiant immediately. Priority Alpha mission briefing in 1 hour." Lisa dressed quickly and made her way to the spaceport. The USS Valiant was Earth's newest destroyer. 500 feet of advanced technology and human engineering. She was fast, heavily armed, and designed to fight in the kind of chaotic battles that humans excelled at. The crew was already assembling. When Lisa arrived, these were Earth's best men and women who had proven themselves in battles against pirates, hostile aliens, and the natural disasters that seemed to follow humans wherever they went. "What's the situation, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Rick Chen, the ship's tactical officer. Lisa activated the main display and showed them the recording from Luxara. The crew listened in silence as Elder Myrowin's voice filled the briefing room, begging for someone to help her dying people. "The signal is 6 months old," Lisa explained. "We don't know if anyone is still alive. We don't know how strong the enemy is. We don't know if we can win. But we know that someone asked for help." Navigation Officer Pete Williams raised his hand. "Ma'am, 800 light-years is a 3-week journey at maximum speed. Even if we leave right now, we might be too late." "Maybe," Lisa agreed. "But we're going anyway, 'cause that's what humans do. When someone calls for help, we answer." The USS Defiance was preparing for the same mission under Captain Tony Rodriguez. Tony was a veteran of the Proxima Wars, where human colonists had fought off alien raiders using nothing but determination and cleverness. He understood what it meant to be outnumbered and outgunned. "Sir," said his weapons officer, Lieutenant, "Carol Davis's the intelligence reports say the Kreks have ships 3 times larger than ours. Their weapons are more powerful, their armor is thicker. How are we supposed to fight them?" Tony looked around at his crew. They were young, most of But they had been trained by the best military in the galaxy. Earth's military had been forged in the fires of constant conflict, shaped by a world that had tried to kill the human race for millions of years. "We're going to fight them the way humans always fight," he said. "Smart, fast, and dirty. We're going to use every trick we know, and we're going to make up new ones as we go." The two ships launched from Earth's orbital facilities 12 hours later. They jumped to hyperspace together, their blue-white engines carrying them toward a battle that would either save an entire civilization or destroy two of Earth's best crews. As they traveled through the void between stars, the crews prepared for what they would find. The weapons officers checked and rechecked their targeting systems. The engineers ran diagnostics on every system. The medical teams prepared for casualties. But most importantly, the human crews did what they had always done best. They adapted. They studied every piece of information they had about the Kreks, looking for weaknesses. They ran combat simulations, testing different tactics and strategies. They prepared for a fight that no one expected them to win. "Captain," said Pete Williams as they approached the halfway point of their journey, "I've been thinking about the tactical situation. 2 ships against an entire armada. It's impossible." Lisa nodded. "Impossible is just another word for difficult. Remember the Battle of Thermopylae? 300 Spartans against the entire Persian army? Everyone said that was impossible too." "How did that end?" asked Rick Chen. "Gassed," Lisa admitted. "But they held the pass long enough for the rest of Greece to prepare for war. Sometimes losing is just another way of winning." The ships continued their journey through hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of a species that might already be dead, preparing for the possibility that the Kreks might follow the human ships home. If that happened, the galaxy would learn what happened when you threatened a death world. But for now, 2 small ships raced through the darkness toward a battle that would change everything. The humans were coming, and they were bringing with them all the fury and determination of a species that had learned to survive in hell. The Kreks had no idea what was about to hit them. The USS Valiant and USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Luxara system. What Captain Lisa Hayes saw through the view screen made her stomach turn cold. The beautiful world that Elder Meyerwin had described was now surrounded by a graveyard of metal and debris. Massive Kreks warships hung in space like black daggers pointed at the planet below. Each one was 3 times the size of the human destroyers, bristling with weapons that could tear through steel like paper. There were 60 of them, maybe more, arranged in a perfect formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming power. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Pete Williams from his navigation station. "Look at the size of those things." Captain Hayes counted the enemy ships on her tactical display. 63 capital ships, hundreds of smaller vessels, and enough firepower to glass an entire planet. The odds were so bad they were almost funny. "Rick, what's our weapon status?" she asked her tactical officer.
"Ow."
"Quantum torpedoes loaded. Pulse cannons ready." "But ma'am, we're looking at 30-1 odds here." Lisa smiled grimly. "And we better make every shot count. Open a channel to the Kreks fleet." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Kreks flagship. General Throckmore was a massive creature, even by Kreks standards. His black scales were covered in battle scars, and his yellow eyes burned with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "I am Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Force," she announced. "You are ordered to cease your attack on the civilian population and withdraw from this system immediately." Throckmore's laugh was like grinding stone. "Humans, I have heard of your pathetic species. You come from far away to die with these weaklings?" "We came because someone asked for help," Lisa replied. "Something you wouldn't understand." "Help?" Throckmore's voice was filled with contempt. "There is no help for the weak. Only death. Turn around and flee, little human, and I might let you live." Lisa's smile got wider. "I'm afraid we can't do that. See, we have a really bad habit of answering distress calls." She cut the communication and turned to her crew. "All hands, battle stations. Time to show these overgrown lizards what humans can do." The space around Luxara exploded into chaos. The Valiant and Defiance move like dancers through the Krex formation, their smaller size and superior speed allowing them to dodge the massive energy beams that could have destroyed them in a single hit. Captain Tony Rodriguez pushed his ship through a gap between two Krex dreadnoughts, firing quantum torpedoes at their engines as he passed. The explosions lit up space like small suns, and one of the giant ships began to list to the side. "This is Rodriguez 2 Valiant," he called over. "To come. These big boys are slow to turn. If we keep moving, they can't track us." Understood, Defiance. "Let's give them something to think about." The human ships used every trick they had learned in their violent history. They fired and moved, never staying in one place long enough for the Krex to target them effectively. They used the debris from destroyed Zephrian ships as cover, darting between the wreckage like fish swimming through a coral reef. But the Krex had numbers on their side. For every shot the humans landed, 10 more energy beams reached out to destroy them. The Valiant's shields were failing, and the Defiance had lost her port weapons array. "Captain," called Lieutenant Carol Davis from the Defiance's weapons station, "we're not going to last much longer up here. These ships are too tough." Captain Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Krex were slowly tightening their formation, trying to trap the human ships in a box of firepower. But he noticed something that made him smile. "Lisa, are you seeing?" "What I'm seeing?" he asked over the comm. Captain Hayes looked at her own display and nodded. "The planet. They're trying to keep us away from the planet. That means there's still something down there worth protecting." "Or someone," Lisa added. "All ships, prepare for atmospheric entry. We're taking this fight to the ground." The Valiant and Defiance broke away from the space battle and dove toward Luxara's purple atmosphere. The Krex ships followed, their massive forms struggling to match the humans' maneuverability in the planet's gravity well as they descended through the clouds. Human crews could see the devastation below. The beautiful floating cities had been reduced to smoking ruins. The crystal forests were burning, sending pillars of colored smoke into the sky, but there were still signs of life. Small groups of Zephrians hiding in the caves and valleys, waiting for death to find them. "There," said Pete Williams, pointing to a large Krex landing site near what had once been the capital city. "Looks like they've got some kind of command center set up." "Take us down," Lisa ordered. "Time to even the odds." The Valiant landed hard in a clearing near the Krex position, her landing struts digging furrows in the purple soil. The cargo bay opened, and 40 human soldiers ran out into the alien landscape. Sergeant Danny Walsh was the first one to hit the ground. He was a veteran of the Titan Colony Wars, where human settlers had fought off alien raiders using nothing but courage and determination. He had never seen anything like the Krex before, but he had fought monsters before. "Spread out and find cover," he shouted to his squad. "Remember your training? These things are big and strong, but they're not bulletproof." The Krex ground forces were already moving to surround the human landing site. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall, with armored skin that could stop small arms fire and claws that could rip through steel. They moved in perfect formation, confident in their superior size and strength, but the humans fought differently than any enemy the Krex had faced before. They didn't stand and fight like civilized soldiers. They ran and hid and struck from unexpected angles. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes that caught the Krex off guard. Private Nicole Davis rolled under a Krex warrior's charge and slapped an explosive device on his back. The blast sent the creature flying into 3 of his companions, taking them all down. Corporal Steve Johnson used his jetpack to leap over a Krex formation, dropping grenades behind him as he flew. "These humans fight like animals," growled Krex Commander Vraxion to his second-in-command. "They have no honor, no discipline." "Yes, sir, but they're very effective animals," his aide replied, watching another squad of Krex warriors fall too. Human tactics. The humans seemed to thrive in the chaos of battle. The more desperate the situation became, the more creative they got. They used every trick they could think of: misdirection, explosives, hit-and-run attacks. In pure stubborn determination, Sergeant Walsh found himself face-to-face with a Krex warrior who was twice his size. The creature's claws reached for him, but Walsh was faster. He dove between the alien's legs and came up behind him, his rifle firing on full automatic into the gaps in the creature's armor. "You want to know the difference between you and us?" Walsh said as the Krex warrior fell. "We fight to conquer. We fight to survive." The battle raged for hours. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, but they were fighting on their terms now. They used the ruined Zephrian cities as cover, turning the rubble into a maze of death traps for the Krex forces. High above, the space battle continued. The Valiant and Defiance had managed to destroy 12 Krex ships, but they were taking heavy damage. The Valiant's engines were failing, and the Defiance was venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. "Captain," said Rick Chen from his tactical station, "we're not going to last much longer. Hull integrity is down to 30%. Lisa Hayes looked at the tactical display. It hurt the Krex badly, but it wasn't enough. The enemy still had overwhelming numbers, and the human ships were dying. That's when the miracle happened. A new hyperspace portal opened at the edge of the system, and through it came the most beautiful sight Lisa Hayes had ever seen. Hundreds of human ships of every size and description poured through the portal like an angry swarm of bees. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan aboard the EDF Titan," came a voice over the comm. "All human ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. We're here to finish what the Valiant and Defiant started." The cavalry had arrived, and the real fight was about to begin. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the EDF Titan, watching as her fleet poured through the hyperspace portal into the Luxara system. Behind her came ships of every type and size cargo haulers, with missile pods welded to their sides. Passenger transports carrying fighter squadrons and mining vessels that had been turned into weapons of war. "Admiral," said her tactical officer, Commander Mark Peters, "we're reading to human destroyers under heavy fire. The Valiant and Defiance are still fighting, but they're badly damaged." Kate nodded grimly. The distress signal from Captain Hayes had reached Earth just 48 hours ago. In that time, every human ship within 100 light-years had dropped what they were doing and raced to Luxara. Merchants, military vessels, even civilian pleasure craft had answered the call. "Signal the fleet," Kate ordered. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. We're going to show these Krex what happens when you mess with people under human protection." General Thakmore watched the human fleet approach with growing confusion. There were hundreds of ships, but most of them looked like civilian vessels. Cargo haulers, transport ships, even what appeared to be passenger liners. Did the humans really think they could fight a war with merchant ships? "Foolish humans," he growled to his bridge crew. "They bring cargo ships to fight warships. We will destroy them all." He was about to learn why that was a very bad assumption. First wave of human ships opened their cargo bays, but instead of supplies, thousands of small attack drones poured out. Each drone was barely the size of a human fist, but they carried enough explosive to punch through armor plating. They moved like a swarm of angry insects, too small and too fast for the Krex weapons to target effectively. "What are these things?" demanded Thakmore as the drones began attaching themselves to his ship's hulls. "Unknown, sir," replied his weapons officer. "They're too small for our targeting systems." The drones exploded all at once, thousands of tiny blasts that ripped through weapon turrets, sensor arrays, and engine exhausts. The Krex ships suddenly found themselves blind and partially disabled, their perfect formation falling apart. The second wave of human ships was even more surprising. What had looked like harmless freighters suddenly lit their engines and rammed directly into the Krex dreadnoughts. The impact of a 1,000,000-ton cargo ship hitting at full speed was like being struck by a small asteroid. "Sir, they're ramming us," shouted the Krex tactical officer. "The humans are using their own ships as weapons." What Thakmore didn't understand was that the human crews had already evacuated 2 smaller vessels moments before impact. The cargo ships were being controlled by artificial intelligence systems that calculated the perfect angle for maximum damage. It was a tactic that no civilized species would ever consider using your own ships as bullets. The third wave brought the real warships, human destroyers, cruisers, and battleships that had been hidden behind the civilian vessels suddenly opened fire with everything they had. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space, followed by pulse cannon blasts that lit up the darkness like lightning, down on the planet's surface. The human ground forces were getting help from an unexpected source. Elder Myrowin had survived the initial attack and had been organizing the remaining Zephrians into a resistance network. When the human soldiers landed, she immediately offered their assistance. "We know this world better than the Krex," she explained to Sergeant Danny Walsh through a translation device. "We can show you where they have set up their command posts." Danny looked at the frail alien woman with respect. Despite everything that had happened to her people, she was still fighting. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is going to be dangerous. These Krex warriors are killers." Myrowin's translucent skin seemed to glow with determination. "Sergeant Walsh, they destroyed our cities, killed our children, and burned our libraries. If I die helping you stop them, then I die with purpose." The combined human and Zephrian forces moved through the ruins of the capital city like ghosts. The Zephrians knew every secret passage, every hidden tunnel, every way to move unseen through their shattered world. They guided the human soldiers to the most important Krex positions while avoiding the main enemy forces. "There," whispered Myrowin, pointing to a massive Krex command center that had been built on the ruins of her people's main temple. "That is where their general coordinates the ground attack." Private Nicole Davis studied the building through her rifle scope, was heavily defended with dozens of Krex warriors patrolling the perimeter, but she noticed something interesting. "Sarge, look at the way they're positioned. They're watching for attacks from the ground, but they're not looking up." Danny followed her gaze to the floating crystal formations that hung above the command center. The Zephrians had built their cities. In the sky, and even after the destruction, some of the crystal platforms were still floating. "Can you get us up there?" he asked Myrowin. The elder Zephrian smiled for the first time since the attack began. "Sergeant, we have been flying for thousands of years. Follow me." The assault on the Krex command center came from above as human. Soldiers dropped from the floating crystals like falling stars. Krex warriors had never faced an attack from that angle before. Their confusion gave the humans the advantage they needed. Corporal Steve Johnson landed directly on top of a Krex officer, his weight and momentum driving the alien to the ground. Before the creature could react, Steve's combat knife found the gap in its armor. "For the Zephrians," he said quietly. The battle in space was reaching its climax. The Krex fleet, despite its size advantage, was being torn apart by human tactics. They couldn't understand or counter. The humans didn't fight like civilized beings. They fought like the survivors of a harsh world who had learned that sometimes the only way to win was to fight dirtier than your enemy. Captain Lisa Hayes, still commanding the battered Valiant, watched as a human cargo ship rammed into the Krex flagship. The impact sent both vessels spinning through space, but the damage to the Krex ship was catastrophic. "This is Hayes to all human vessels," she announced over the comm. "The Krex flagship is disabled. All ships, concentrate fire on that target." The combined firepower of the human fleet focused on General Thokmore's ship. Quantum torpedoes and pulse cannon blasts hammered the massive vessel from every direction. The Krex general, who had conquered 17 star systems, watched in disbelief as his ship began to break apart around him. "This is impossible," he roared. "We are the strongest species in the galaxy." "No," came a voice over the comm. It was Admiral Sullivan, her words carrying across the battlefield. "We're the strongest, but you made one mistake. You hurt innocent people, and you asked for help from the wrong species." The Krex flagship exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. The remaining Krex ships, leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. But the humans weren't finished with them. "All ships pursue," ordered Admiral Sullivan. "No survivors, no prisoners. We came here to commit genocide. We're going to make sure they never get the chance to do it again." The human fleet chased the fleeing Krex ships to the edge of the system and beyond. What had started as a rescue mission had become something else, entirely a declaration that the galaxy now had protectors who would fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. On the planet's surface, the surviving Zephrians began to emerge from their hiding places. They found human soldiers helping to clear rubble, human medics treating wounded civilians, and human engineers already working to restore power to the damaged cities. Elder Myrowin stood in the ruins of her temple. watching humans and Zephrians work together to rebuild what the Krex had destroyed. For the first time in months, she felt something she had thought was lost forever. Hope. The Deathworlders had come. And they had brought with them something the galaxy had never seen before: the willingness to fight for strangers, to risk everything. For people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do, the age of human protection had begun. 3 months after the Battle of Luxara, the purple world was slowly healing. The floating cities were being rebuilt, piece by piece, with human engineers working alongside Zephrian architects to create something even more beautiful than before. The crystal forests were growing back, their colored light dancing through the repaired atmosphere processors. Elder Myrowin stood in the new council chamber, looking out at a sight that would have been impossible just a year ago. Human children and Zephrian younglings played together in the restored gardens, their laughter echoing through the halls where once only the sounds of war had been heard. "It's remarkable," she said to Captain Lisa Hayes, who had remained on Luxara to oversee the reconstruction efforts. "A year ago, we didn't even know your species existed. Our children played together as if they had been friends forever." Lisa smiled as she watched her own daughter Emma teaching a group of young Zephrians how to throw a baseball. The kids were having trouble with the concept at first, but they were learning quickly. "Children adapt faster than adults," Lisa replied. "They don't see differences the way we do. They just see friends." The reconstruction of Luxara had become something more than just rebuilding a world. It had become a symbol of what the galaxy could be when different species worked together. Human technology combined with Zephrian artistry had created cities that were both functional and beautiful. Human medicine had saved thousands of Zephrian lives, while Zephrian knowledge of their world's ecosystem had helped restore the damaged environment. But more importantly, it had become the foundation for something entirely new. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived on Luxara that morning, along with representatives from 47 different species. The news of humanity's victory over the Krex had spread across the galaxy faster than light, and the reaction had been immediate. "Admiral," said Elder Myrowin, as she greeted the human commander, "welcome to what your people have helped us build." Kate looked around at the mixture of human and alien architecture. The gardens where different species worked together, the children playing games that combined rules from a dozen different worlds. It was beautiful, but it was also something else. "It's a beginning," Kate said quietly. "The question is, what do we do next?" The answer came that afternoon, during the first meeting of what would become known as the Galactic Protection Council. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the rebuilt council chamber, each one having the same story to tell. "The Krex attacked our world 6 months ago," said Ambassador Tolkesh of the Meridian Republic. "We sent out a distress call, but no one came. We had to fight them alone. The Void Collective destroyed 3 of our colony worlds," added Captain Zerlin of the Centauri Federation. "We begged for help from every species we knew. They all said it was too dangerous. The Saurian Empire has been threatening our borders for years," said Elder Corneth of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. "We offered them tribute. We tried to negotiate, but they just keep demanding more." One by one, the representatives told their stories. Each one was different, but they all had the same ending. They had been alone when the predators came calling. No one had helped them, because no one wanted to risk their own people for strangers. "But you came," said Ambassador Tolkesh, looking directly at Admiral Sullivan. "You traveled 800 light-years to help people you had never met. Why?" Kate stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. Around her, dozens of different species waited for her answer. Some were tall and graceful like the Zephrians, others were small and quick like the Meridians. A few were as large as humans, and some were smaller than human children. But they all had one thing in common. They had all been victims of stronger, more aggressive species. "It's because that's what you do when someone calls for help," Kate said simply. "It doesn't matter if they're human or alien, friend or stranger. When someone is in trouble, you help them. That's what makes us civilized." "But what about the cost?" asked Captain Zerlin. "What about the risk? You could have been destroyed along with the Zephrians." Kate nodded. "We could have been. If we had been, other humans would have come to avenge us. That's also what we do. Elder Myrowyn stood up from her place at the council table. The humans have shown us something we had forgotten. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of those willing to fight for it. The treaty that was signed that day created the Terran Protection Pact, with its headquarters on Luxara. The agreement was simple. Any member species that came under attack could call for help, and the other members would respond. Earth would provide the military backbone, while the other species would contribute according to their abilities. We're not building an empire, Kate explained to the assembled representatives. We're building a family that looks out for each other. The first test of the new alliance came just 3 weeks later. A species called the Melodians, who communicated through music instead of words, sent out a distress call from the Cygnus sector. They were being attacked by something called the Void Collective, a group of machines that consumed entire worlds to fuel their expansion. Admiral Sullivan didn't hesitate. Within hours, a combined fleet of human warships and allied vessels was on its way to Cygnus. Melodians had expected to die alone, just like the Zephrians had. Instead, they found themselves protected by an alliance of species who had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to fight for it. The battle against the Void Collective was harder than the fight against the Krex. The machines felt no fear, no pain, no mercy. They just consumed everything in their path like a plague of metal locusts. The humans had learned something important from their victory at Luxara. They were not alone anymore. Zephrian pilots, their natural ability to fly, proved to be excellent fighter pilots when given human technology. Meridian engineers, with their small size and quick reflexes, were perfect for sabotage missions against the machine ships. The Centauri, with their advanced mathematics, helped calculate targeting solutions that human computers couldn't match. Is Admiral Sullivan to all allied vessels? Kate announced over the comm as the battle raged around the Melodian homeworld. We're not just fighting for the Melodians. We're fighting for the idea that peaceful people deserve to live in peace. The Void Collective was defeated but not destroyed. They retreated to the edge of the galaxy where they would spend the next decade rebuilding their forces. But they had learned something important. The galaxy was no longer defenseless. News of the victory at Cygnus spread even faster than the news from Luxara. Within a year, over 100 species had joined the Terran Protection Pact, the Saurian Empire. Faced with the possibility of fighting the entire alliance, chose to negotiate instead of attack. The remnants of the Krex hegemony surrendered rather than face human revenge. For the first time in galactic history, predators were afraid of the prey. Captain Lisa Hayes, now promoted to admiral, stood on the observation deck of the new Luxara station 5 years after the first battle. The station orbited the purple world like a guardian angel, its weapons and shields ready to protect not just the Zephrians, but any species that called for help. Admiral, said Commander Jake Morrison, who had become her second in command, we're receiving another distress call. This time from the Andromeda sector. A species called the Crystallians is under attack by the plague swarm. Lisa smiled. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, filled with predators and disasters and 1,000 different ways to die. But it was also filled with protectors now. Species who had learned that the strongest weapon in the universe was not technology or size or superior firepower. It was the willingness to help a stranger. What? Plot a course for Andromeda, she ordered, and send word to the Alliance fleet. We've got work to do. As the human ships prepared to depart for their next mission, Elder Myrowyn sent a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. To all peaceful species of the galaxy, you are not alone. The Deathworlders have come, and they fight not for conquest, but for protection. Not for glory, but for peace. The age of fear is over. The age of hope has begun. The galaxy had learned that when someone cried for help, the humans would always answer, and that made all the difference.